Ruth Marie Terry, September 8, 1936 to July 1974, also known as Lady of the Dunes, was a formerly unidentified murder victim found on July 26, 1974, in the Race Point Dunes near to Provincetown, Massachusetts, United States. Her body was exhumed in 1980, 2000, and 2013 in efforts to identify her. On October 31, 2022, the FBI field office in Boston announced that Terry had been officially identified. Her husband, Guy Moldovan, was officially named as her killer on August 28, 2023. She was born on September 8, 1936, in a mountainside shack in Whitwell, Tennessee, to Johnny and Eva Terry, the latter of whom died at age 23. In 1957, following a brief marriage, Terry moved from Whitwell to work at the Fisher Body Automotive plant in Livonia, Michigan. In 1958 she gave birth to her son, Richard, but could not care for him because she was too poor. She accepted the superintendent of her place of work, Richard Hanchett Sr., adopting her son in exchange for his paying off her expenses. Upon finalizing the adoption process, Terry moved from Livonia to California. In 1972, she contacted her son, but he was not prepared to see her as a result of drug overdose that left him in a coma for 18 days. On February 16, 1974, she married Guy Rockwell Moldovan, an antiques dealer in Reno, Nevada. 4 months before she died, the pair made the trip to Whitwell to spend the holidays with her family. Brittany Novinglosky, Ruth's grandniece, later said that Terry wasn't herself when she was with Moldovan, that she was always possessive. After Whitwell, the couple headed to Chattanooga to spend the holiday with Terry's half-brother, Kenneth, and his wife Carol. Later they remembered Terry and Moldovan telling them they were to travel the United States in search of antiques. Kenneth further stated that they discussed visiting Massachusetts as they were leaving. At the end of summer in 1974, Moldovan went back to Tennessee to inform Terry's family that she was missing from the couple's house in California. He reportedly spent a short period of time there and only told them that he didn't know where Terry was. James, the brother of Terry, went to California and hired a private investigator to look for her. The detective told Terry's family that all of her belongings had been sold and she left the state on her own because she was involved with a religious cult. In the years leading up to her identification, Terry was considered dead and so was listed in her family's obituaries as deceased. Carol thought she might be in the federal witness protection program and therefore could not pen a letter to her family. On July 26, 1974, a 12-year-old girl followed a barking dog to the decomposing body of an unidentified woman in the Race Point Dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts. The remains were just yards away from a road and had a significant amount of insect activity. 2 sets of footprints led to the body, and tire tracks were found 50 yards, 46 meters, from the scene. The woman may have died 2 weeks beforehand. The victim lay on half of a beach blanket face down. She did not show any signs of struggle, and police thought she may have known her killer or was asleep when she was killed. A blue bandana and a pair of Wrangler jeans lay under her head. Her long auburn or red hair was pulled back in a ponytail using a gold-flecked elastic band. Her toenails were painted pink. Police estimated her height at about 5 feet 6 inches, 168 centimeters, though at first it was thought to have been 5 feet 8 inches, 173 centimeters, weighed 145 pounds, 66 kilograms, and had an athletic build. She also had expensive dental work costing between $5,000 and $10,000 between crowns, in which several teeth had been removed from her mouth. Both hands and one forearm were missing. Most sources agree that she was between 25 and 40 years old. However, she may have been 20 or as old as 49 years. The woman had almost been beheaded, possibly through strangulation. One side of her head had been crushed, probably with a military-type entrenching tool. This head injury was the cause of death. There were also signs of sexual assault, likely post-mortem. Some investigators believe that the missing teeth, hands and forearm indicate the killer wanted to hide either the victim's identity or their own. The woman was buried in October 1974 after the case went cold. In 2014, one of the case investigators raised funds for a new casket, because the original thin metal casket had rusted and deteriorated. Police pored over thousands of missing person cases and a list of approved vehicles driven through the area. No matches were found. At the scene, the sand and beach blanket were not disturbed, suggesting that the body was possibly moved to the specific spot where it was found. No other evidence was found, besides the jeans, bandana, blanket, and ponytail holder, despite extensive searches of the surrounding dunes. Her first facial reconstruction was in clay, completed in 1979. Her skeleton was exhumed to analyze in 1980. New leads were not discovered at that time, though her skull was not replaced in the grave at that point in time. Her skeleton was exhumed again in March 2000 for DNA sampling. A CT of her skull was conducted in May 2010. It produced images used by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the development of another facial reconstruction. In 1987, a Canadian woman said to a friend that in about 1972, she had seen her father strangling a woman in Massachusetts. Police searched for the woman but could not find her. A woman then approached police and said that the reconstruction of the victim was like her sister who had disappeared in Boston in 1974. Another lead that detectives pursued was missing criminal Rory Jean Kessinger, who would have been 25 years old at the time of the murder. She had escaped from jail in 1973. Authorities found a resemblance between Kessinger and the victim. However, DNA from Kessinger's mother did not match the victim. Two other missing women, Frances Ewalt and Vicki Lamberton, were also eliminated. In August 2015, rumors surfaced that Lady of the Dunes may have been an extra in the 1975 film Jaws, which had been filmed on Martha's Vineyard, particularly the village of Menemsha, about 100 miles, 160 kilometers, south of Provincetown, between May and October 1974. Joe Hill, the son of horror author Stephen King, brought this to police attention after reading The Skeleton Crew: How Amateur Sleuths Are Solving America's Coldest Cases just weeks before. While viewing the movie's 4th of July beach scene, Hill noticed a woman in the crowd wearing a blue bandana and jeans, similar to those found with the body. While a lead investigator has expressed interest in this lead, others have described it as far-fetched and wild speculation. In 2022, the skeletal remains were sent to Othram. From these, a DNA profile was generated that was used to identify distant relatives, and eventually identify the victim. On October 31, 2022, the FBI field office in Boston announced that the victim had been identified as Terry. On the 2nd of November 2022, the MSP revealed that they wanted to know about Terry's late husband, Guy Rockwell Moldovan, who was born on the 27th of October 1923 to 14 March 2002. In 1942, Moldovan lived in New York City and studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. During World War II, Moldovan was medically discharged from active military duty due to a mastoid infection. He married Joellen May Loop on May 11, 1946, in Bellevue, Pennsylvania. He was working as a professor at that time. They went to New York, California, and later to Seattle, Washington, where Moldovan was working as a disc jockey. He divorced his wife on July 16, 1956. 2 years later, on September 30, 1958, Moldovan married Manzanita Aileen, Manzi, Ryan in Kootenai, Idaho. Manzanita had a daughter from a previous marriage, Dolores Ann Mearns, then aged 18. Both women disappeared in Seattle on April 1, 1960, with Moldovan becoming the prime suspect. He fled Seattle but was arrested by the FBI and charged with unlawful flight to avoid giving testimony into their deaths. In short order, Moldovan married Evelyn Marie Emerson on July 29, 1960, in King County, Washington. He remarried her on August 10, 1963, in Los Angeles. Moldovan was soon indicted for larceny in connection with the swindling of his third wife's family out of $10,000 at about the time his second wife disappeared. In 1961 he pleaded guilty to the charges and received a 15-year sentence. A judge suspended the sentence in March 1962 on condition that Moldovan repay the money. True crime writer Ann Rule devoted a section of her 2007 book Smoke, Mirrors and Murder to Moldovan in connection with the Ryan Mearns disappearances, with an exhaustive discussion of police efforts to associate Moldovan with the crime. Investigators found the dismembered human body parts in Moldovan's septic tank, but could not prove that it was from one of the women missing. According to Rule, Moldovan was never prosecuted in connection as the King County prosecutor would not do it without a body. Rule mentions that Moldovan married a woman named Terry in February 1974 in Reno, Nevada. Moldovan is also the prime suspect in the murder of Henry Lawrence, Red Baird, a 28-year-old bread truck driver, and the disappearance of Barbara Jo Kelly, a 17-year-old waitress, in June 1950. Barbara was last seen in Humboldt County, California, on June 17, 1950, when she embarked on a date with Baird, her boyfriend. Baird's body was discovered face down on the beach near Table Bluff the following morning. He was shot in the back of the head. Except for his shoes and socks, he was naked. Barbara's personal clothing was found carefully folded and tucked underneath the rest of his, with the exception of her shoes and stockings. No trace of Barbara herself could be found. She has not been seen or heard from since, and it is thought that whoever shot Baird had kidnapped her. Moldovan moved to Chualer, California, a small community near Salinas, around 1976. According to a feature article written about him in 1985, he had retired from his job as an executive vice president of a silver store on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. In the profile, he was working at the radio station KAZU in Pacific Grove as a volunteer host of a 3-hour weekly call-in show on aging, growing and making transitions. He also worked at a tobacco shop in Carmel. According to his obituary, Moldovan was born in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He died at his home following a lengthy illness, survived by his wife, Phyllis Moldovan, and his sister, Joan Towers. On August 28, 2023, Moldovan was officially named as Terry's killer. In 1981, investigators learned a woman who resembled the victim was seen with mobster Whitey Bulger around the time the woman presumably died. Bulger was known for removing his victim's teeth. A link to Bulger has not been proven, and he was murdered in prison in 2018. Tony Costa, a serial killer in Truro, Massachusetts, was initially a suspect, but later eliminated. Costa died on May 12, 1974. The victim was found in July 1974. Haddon Clark confession murderer Haddon Clark confessed to the murder, stating, "I could have told the police what her name was, but after they beat the shit out of me, I wasn't going to tell them shit. This murder is still unsolved and what the police are looking for is in my grandfather's garden." Authorities say Clark suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, a condition which may lead someone to confess falsely to crimes. In 2000, Clark led police to a spot where he claimed he had buried 2 victims 20 years before. He also stated that he had murdered several others in various states between the 1970s and the 1990s. In 2004, Clark sent a letter to a friend stating that he had killed a woman on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. He also sent 2 drawings, one of a handless, naked woman sprawled on her stomach, and another of a map pointing to where the body was found.